dan svima i dobrodošli na ovaj današnji webinar koji nosi naziv Vodič za izvoz težeg.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar that bears the name Guide for Fresh, Frozen and Hot Processed Fruit and Vegetables Export to the US Market. This particular webinar is supported by FAO, EBRD and the Development Agency of Serbia. My name is Dragan Krunic and I will be moderating the webinar today. At the very beginning, we have simultaneous interpretation available, so you can activate it by accessing the round globe at the bottom of the screen, which is titled Interpretation, and then selecting the language you wish to listen the event in. Make sure you tick the Mute Original Audio button. The event today is aimed particularly for the producers of fresh, frozen, and hot processed fruit and vegetables in the region and how they can export their goods to the US market. We want to increase the potential of export to the US market. US market is the second largest global food market, and it is expected it will increase in size by more than 1%. Online food sales from 7% will increase to 11.2% in the US, which of course opens doors for producers from the Western Balkans region. The webinar you will be attending today related to the guide for fresh, frozen, and hot processed fruits and vegetables is organized as part of the joint project of FAO, EBRD, and the project is called the Support to Diversification and Export of the Food Processing Sector in Western Balkans. The aim of the project is to support domestic and regional companies and support them in their export endeavors and strengthen their capacities. First, electronic educational platform was developed within this project and an online video series which is meant to help all exporters of fresh, frozen, and hot processed fruit and vegetables. Vodic.ris.gov.rs is the website of this particular project. On this website, you can receive all relevant information on vegetable and fruit export to the US market. Before we start with the official part, of course, you can ask questions to any of our panelists today. Of course, you can do it via the chat function. We will now hear from Emmanuel, who is the senior economist in the Food Agency of the United Nations. Emmanuel, you may take the floor.
Good morning, everybody, and a big thank to all for participating in this webinar, and also a big thank to the Development Agency of Serbia for hosting the seminar. So I'm Emmanuel Idier. I'm a senior economist in the Investment Center Division of the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. And I'm currently seconded also to the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So for those who may not know, FAO and the EBRD have had a very long-standing cooperation. It's over 20 years already. To put it in a nutshell, FAO, which is a technical agency of the United Nations, is providing technical advice, but also policy support to the agribusiness investment portfolio of the EBRD. We work in a wide range of countries, from Central Asia to Morocco, where the bank operates. But of course, we are quite active in the Western Balkans. So maybe I will give a few examples of projects that we have in the region. Maybe I'll start with the support that we currently provide to the government of Serbia for the development of a new irrigation strategy that takes into account climate change consideration. I think climate change is very relevant to the horticultural sector and also irrigation. We also have projects that are more geared to agricultural SMEs. For instance, in Montenegro, we are supporting rural SMEs to reach out to the agribusiness sector through digital solutions. We have also traditional work quite a lot in Montenegro, in Serbia, on developing quality labels and also origin-based labels like a geographical indication that are useful for agricultural producers and SMEs. And maybe just to mention a last project, also a very topical subject, we are working on a regional project on animal health. As you know, animal health has been quite an issue of concern for export from the regions to the EU, although I hear there are some good news on that front. So maybe on the cooperation, just another final word. We work mostly with the agribusiness team of the EBRD, but also with the advice for small enterprises. As obviously in the agricultural sector, there are quite a lot of smaller players that we need to support. So now on the topic of export diversification, I think we started to discuss the issue with the Ministry of Agriculture of Serbia a few years back when we were trying to identify priorities for the work of EBRD, FAO, and the ministry, and export diversification came out as an important topic. It's quite striking that the agricultural exports of the region are very much concentrated in a few markets, obviously the EU market, the Fda country markets, and also Russia. And I think if we take the example of Serbia, the remainder, like the other markets, are only 10%. So it's obviously quite natural. On the other hand, it's also bearing quite a high level of risks in case one of these big markets closes down. And also, I would say that there are probably some qualitative markets that are not explored by the producers. So in the project that Dragana has mentioned, which is the context of this webinar today, we focus specifically on the fresh produce and the horticultural sector, looking at these non-traditional markets. I would maybe mention the US market because it's a huge market. I think the import from the into the US of horticultural products was valued at $40 billion in 2019. So it's potentially a big opportunity. Also, it's not explored. Serbia has this generalized system preference access to the market, but not really using it. So I won't say more. I think it's, again, thanks for joining, and I hope we'll have an interesting discussion this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel, for this brief overview, let's say brief overview. And the next speaker,
next speaker that I would like to introduce is Alexandra Miladinovic, who works in the sector for support of SMEs at EBRD.
Hvala puno, dobar dan svima i hvala puno i kolegama iz FAO i RAS-a i organizatorima. Zaista je zadovoljstvo da predstavim naše aktivnosti na ovom skupu. Dragana, ja sam stavila lepo ovu moju prezentaciju.
It's really a great pleasure for me. Let me just check whether
U principu već je i Emmanuel pomenuo.
In principle, Emmanuel already mentioned that we cooperate. We have cooperated with the FAO for a long time, and our EBR team for agribusiness, and we also cover micros and the advisory part. I'm the manager of the program of advisory support to SMEs in Serbia, and I also cover the region of Western Balkans for relations with various stakeholders, donors, and other partners. This advisory support program to SMEs in the region has been active for a long time, since 1993. It started and it developed over the years, and in these four countries, B&H, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Serbia, we have supported more than 3,000 enterprises. Annually, about 240 new projects. And we, of course, collaborate with the portfolio of the SMEs we previously were engaged with. We are funded by donors. Our largest donor is definitely the European Union, but also, in addition, SIDA, Luxembourg, Norway, and Special Fund of EBRD's shareholders. This advisory support program is designed to help local enterprises to acquire skills and knowledge they lack, and it involves engaging experts in the field in order to be more innovative, more competitive, and to improve their export potential. Two main tools of support, instruments of support, are engaging a national consultant and international experts. The difference between these two components is the very nature of the projects. National consultants, local consultants have a kind of expertise, and if there is a lack of expertise in the countries, then we engage international experts, and you can see the numbers for the average projects on the screen, but also we need to add that donors are quite willing to provide even more funds. If we talk about engaging international experts, it's 12 to 18 months duration of the projects on average, and the budget here is larger, about 40,000 euros. And the average participation of the relevant companies is about 16%, their share. But of course, it depends on the size of the company, their revenues, and the number of employees. The fields that we, the areas that we support are everything the companies need: strategic planning, digitalization, quality standards introduction, market surveys, improving organization, HR. And what is typical for our projects is that they have been defined, tailor-made. Yes, tailor-made in English, just what those companies or enterprises need. In addition to advisory projects, we also work a lot on raising the awareness of our clients that they need this kind of support that's necessary for their further development. We also train local consultants to be more ready and capable to provide expertise. And we also attempt all the time to be visible, that for our good practice examples to be visible and for other companies to take the same steps. As for the criteria for this kind of support, those are SMEs employing up to 500 employees, but we have clients with a larger number of employees, and donors are ready to support them as well. 2 years of being in business and majority private ownership and local ownership. And also we need to have in our program companies that are ready to change, to adopt better ways of work, to be ready for innovation, for new and modern way of work.
Što se tiče industrija, ovde su date neke standardne
industries. As for the industries, these are standard industries that the EBRD does not support in the region. Our portfolio, most of our clients is in food industry, so it's between 20-something%, which is not a surprise, bearing in mind how important the industry is in the region. We support exporting companies. We have always done so, and we have a large number of clients in our portfolio with that component. 43% of our total portfolio are exporting businesses, and we follow up on the results of those projects because we have cooperated with them for a long time. 50% of our clients saw a rise in exports after implementing advisory projects in cooperation with us. Export-oriented companies need different types of support. They, of course, need to comply with the market requirements of their future markets or current markets, but then introducing quality standard, optimization of production, preparing for fairs, market survey. Digitalization is becoming more and more important nowadays, but of course we highlight here that everything the companies need, we may support them in that, in the way they need to be supported. I would like to share just a couple of examples of support that we could provide to exporting companies. This is an example. This is an exporter of fruit and vegetables. This particular client intends to start exporting to the US market, as it were. It's a new market for them, and they are very experienced in exporting to the region and the EU. They implemented various standards through our support, and after 1 year evaluation, we saw that production control was improved, that procedures have been defined, and the new procedures have been introduced, and it is important to have this employee attitude, and their habits also were improved or changed, and credibility was improved, and their revenues rose by 30%, 30. Yet another example is the enterprise producing lines for food production. 30% revenues come from exports, their revenues, and we also worked with them and saw significant positive effects of the project. In communication with the client, we defined that further process of digitalization was needed, and we are ready and willing to support them further. I did not want to go into technical details about how to apply and so on. Things are really quite simple. The procedures are quite simple. We do not have a special period. You can apply to us anytime, and the procedures are very simple indeed for applying. But what we saw as a complementary thing is that our colleagues from FAO, they work on simplifying matters and clearly defining the steps that the companies or would-be exporting companies should do. And for us, that we can help you with changes in the company, within the business that you need to undertake in the process of meeting all the requirements. We are at your disposals and all our colleagues from the region, and we are open for any questions you may have at any time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Alexandra, for your presentation and for the information you shared with us. Now, I would like to give the floor to Jelena Cvijanović, Head of Sector for Supporting SMEs in the Development Agency of Serbia. Thank you very much. My name is Jelena Cvijanović. I am here on behalf of the Development Agency of Serbia. What I would like to say first is that our cooperation with the FAO and EBRD came at the right time for our agency. And although at all times our focus was to support SMEs in order for them to improve their exports, we highlighted their participation in international fairs and co-funding the implementation of standards and so on. But last year, export support was actually finalized somehow because we have a project for promoting exports, which supports food and wood industries. And after we started this program, we started collaborating with the FAO and the EBRD on this guide. And this means that our support would be even better, and our intentions to assist our business people will be as we want them to be. Before we started this export promotion program, we had a series of consultation meetings with the representatives of the sector. And what was our joint conclusion was that business people need true, correct and ample information. Financial support is always welcome by all means, but most of them required just the right information for what they want to do when they like to go, to enter another market. This was confirmed by many inquiries we get from SMEs. More than 90% of them ask for information about certificates, about first steps, which licenses, permits, channels of sale for a particular market, and so on. And that is why I believe that this guide and this platform is what we need and what will turn out to be very useful for our businesses. When we just started sharing information about this guide, feedback was such that we realized that this portal is indeed a place for SMEs to get the knowledge they lack and they actually need. I don't want to waste a lot of your time because today we are here to present a nice new tool. I would like to thank you once again for being here, and I can promise you that our cooperation with the FAO and EBRD will develop further, and that we will have new cooperation, new activities, and this will be just the first in a series of guides for all international markets where we can succeed. That's all I wanted to say, and if you have any questions about any of these issues, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jelena. And now we continue with our webinar. Of course, we're going to present the guidebook, the guide for the export into the United States. I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, Dimitri, who is the senior economist at FAO. Dimitri, you may take the floor.
Thank you very much, and dobar den and dobrodošli. It's a pleasure to see so many friends from Serbia today. We sincerely miss you and hope that one day we'll be able to meet you in person. So let me start my presentation and share the screen. And so I'll talk today about very important issue when it comes to export market development. It's food safety and how it affects trade in a category which is of utmost importance for Serbia in fruits and vegetables, with specific emphasis on raspberries. When it comes to Serbia's export potential, Emmanuel already mentioned it in the opening. Fruits and vegetables are two categories that enjoy tremendous export development potential in Serbia. If we are to consider fruits as one category, Serbia can double exports of fresh and processed fruits. And when it comes to exports of vegetables, and on this slide you can see it's a dark green group of products in the middle, Serbia can increase exports of these products by 80%. When we talk about inclusive export development that can benefit small and medium farmers, it is very clear that out of these products, these are, first of all, raspberries, because Serbia already has a very well-developed supply system to collect and export frozen raspberries. Because it is clear that if we are, for instance, to consider apples, the benefits and exports of these products will be probably utilized by a few big companies that are engaged in production and exports. So speaking about raspberries, according to our colleagues from the International Trade Center based in Geneva, if we are to consider the actual exports of frozen raspberries from Serbia in 2019 at 276 million, the untapped potential for Serbian exporters to increase exports, so that's the additional exports that Serbia can achieve, is about $114 million. Serbia is well-known leader in global raspberry trade. And so it's by far the largest exporter of raspberries, followed by Chile, the European Union, and then Ukraine. You can see it on this slide. And when it comes to the top markets, it is worth mentioning that EU, Serbia's immediate neighbor, is of course by far the largest importer of frozen raspberries. However, when we look at the two next largest importers, we see that the United States and Canada are also very big importers of frozen raspberries, and then Australia. So Serbia is already #1 supplier of raspberries to the European Union. But if you look at the left graph, you see that it is followed by Ukraine, and Ukraine has rapidly increased exports of frozen raspberries from that were virtually below just $10 million in 2015 and reached already $44 million in 2020. So there are other countries, competition is growing, and Serbia needs to look for new markets and expand them. When it comes to the United States market as the second largest, Serbia is #2 supplier to the United States with $28 million of imports based on the CAF basis. And it is preceded by Chile, which exports $43 million worth of frozen raspberries. Please note that the slide, the left-hand slide, the figures are presented on FOB basis. And on the right-hand side, when it comes to importers, it's on CAF basis. So the numbers between the two would not match because naturally import values include cost and freight. So it's a small remark if you'll be digging into the numbers deeper. Between the two biggest importers of raspberries from Serbia, EU is, of course, by far the most dominant. Serbia is supplying raspberries to Germany, France, Belgium, Poland, Netherlands, other countries. Germany alone in this column, which shows 266 million worth of imports, it accounts for 4 times more exports than the United States. However, what we've seen is that the German market has been relatively stable over years, whereas the US market has been growing, and it is clearly seen from the blue group of columns at the bottom that Serbian exporters have managed to enter the US market and increase their presence. So 10 years ago, Serbia exported barely $2 million worth of raspberries to the United States. Now it's exporting almost $30 million. US, as Emmanuel already mentioned, is a growing, important market for food products globally. It is the country that actually welcomes imported products. Today, 32% of all fresh vegetables, 55% of fresh fruit, and 94% of seafood are supplied by imports. About 15% of the entire US supply is already supplied by imports. Imports have steadily increased in the last 15 years and will continue to grow in the future. Of course, the United States has a strict and robust regulatory system when it comes to regulating food imports. just to give you the magnitude, there are about 125,000 companies that are registered with the Food and Drug Administration of the United States to export to the United States. So, and these 125,000 companies, they come from 200 countries. So, food safety as a public good and food safety standards, they're critically important for all markets, specifically in the United States. It's to assure public health and well-being of consumers, as well as in other countries. But trade economists also consider that food safety standards and compliance with them have overall adverse effect on trade. So, and that's what we also need to consider. So compliance with food standards allows you to access the market, but it has a cost. So speaking of food safety standards as they're measured by food safety incidents, let's say the compliance with these food safety standards is measured by food safety incidents. What we have seen, and this slide comes, I will explain later, what we have seen is that in fruits and vegetables, the number of food safety incidents in the US market has been steadily declining until from 2012 until 2020, until it really skyrocketed in 2020. And this year we have already seen more than 500 registered food safety incidents involving fruits and vegetables in the United States. And there is no domestic treatment. Imported products in the United States are treated to the same standard. So these food safety incidents cover both imported and domestic products. And this data on food safety incidents come from a well-known and reputable food quality and safety surveyor. SGS, the company, is well known in Serbia. And what it does, it uses artificial intelligence and internet scraping to gather information from on food safety incidents and analyze this information, classify it worldwide. So when we talk about sources of information that are used on this slide over this 10-year period, we see that naturally US Food and Drug Administration provided most of these alerts on imported fruits and vegetables. And other US regulatory agencies, such as US Department of Agriculture and researchers, they're not playing very important role in, let's say, controlling the quality and safety of food. So specifically, as we talk about raspberries, it's a very small category in US food and agricultural import. So when it comes to these notifications over these years, there were 88 notifications involving berries and small fruits. You see it highlighted with arrow. And if we are to look down more into where raspberries stand, we see that small fruit and berries over the last years accounted for only 23 out of 88 notifications. So it is not a major food safety threat to the US consumers, but it is still very important for Serbian exporters. Looking specifically at the food safety, as we're using Zoom, let's zoom in on specific food safety issues faced by Serbian exporters of raspberries in their two key markets, the United States of America and the European Union. So as you can see, the notifications from the United States are marked in blue and notifications from the European Union are marked in, let's say, burgundy or brown. We clearly see that over the 10-year period, Serbia has enjoyed nearly zero notification trade with the European Union, despite the fact that, it's the biggest market. At the same time, exports to the United States were far more watched and controlled by the US regulatory agencies. And the number of notifications peaked in 2013 with 11 notifications from FDA on Serbian Raspberry and Blackberry exports. And then this number came down in 2010, and then unfortunately started increasing again in 2019 and 2020. Of course, these data would be incomplete if we look just at the number of notifications. We have to weight it by trade volumes. So think about this graph as the number of miles that each driver drives without getting a speeding ticket. So the higher the bar, the better. So the more miles you drive, the better it is. So it shows how many millions of trade occur for one US rejection of Serbian product versus one EU notification of in-compliance of Serbian raspberries. So what we clearly see is that until 2015, Serbian exporters have been continuously improving their performance, and the number of, as trade grew, the number of notifications per 1 million of trade was actually getting lower, and the number and trade volume per one notification was increasing. So that was a positive development. However, since 2016, what we've seen is that there was a reverse trend. So let's say in 2020, we only saw 133 million of trade in raspberries with the European Union for one notification, and only 4 million of trades that went unnoticed or unrejected in the United States. So that trend is something Serbian exporters really need to consider in the future and pay attention to food safety requirements of importing countries. I specifically put this table, which provides a bit more information about the nature of rejections of Serbian products in the United States. It comes from US FDA dashboard, which is publicly accessible. So if we look at the main reasons for these notifications, they are, of course, in compliance with pesticides, maximum residue limits, and the use of unregistered pesticides. So about, let's say, 89% of all notifications fall within that category. However, what we also see is that there are some notifications that are worrisome that relate to food hygiene. In 2019, US FDA detected hepatitis, it's a human virus, in frozen raspberries from Serbia. There are also quite, I mean, we cannot say that they're frequent, but since 2014 to 2018, there were 2 cases of supply chain issues where FDA inspectors were considering Serbian raspberries in the category of filthy product, decomposed. So probably there was freezing and thawing, and that resulted in product spoilage that was detected in inspection. There was one notification of unsafe food additive used, and there was one interesting notification about product rejection due to, and I ask you to listen carefully here, due to in-compliance with calibrated units not commonly used in the United States. So exporters have to pay attention to the units of measurement and labeling that have to be used in that market. When we talk about US market, another important area to consider is reputational risks, because unlike notifications of the European Union that are published in RASF, which stands for Rapid Alert System for Food and Feed, US Food and Drug Administration's notifications, they actually include the names of company that violate these regulations, and they include their addresses. So I naturally removed the name of companies from the table that you can see on that slide, but that's how it comes to the public. Again, it is available from US FDA dashboard. You can see legal name of the company and company address, as well as specific code related to violation of US food safety standards. So to sum up, again, I think Serbia has tremendous potential to increase exports. It really needs to diversify these exports. So we're talking about 100% potential to increase fruits and fruit exports, 80% potential to increase vegetable exports. Serbia needs to increase presence in new and growing market because trade concentration is quite high. US and North America is a growing fruit and vegetable market, so it needs to be seriously considered by both exporters and Serbian agencies that support exports. The number of reported food safety incidents in the United States in that sector has grown sharply, which shows very high regulatory attention to food safety controls. So while in the European Union, food safety does not seem to be a concern, we have only one notification per 133 million worth of imports. Both exporters, Serbian regulatory agencies need to watch carefully exports to the United States, as there we get one notification for every $4 million worth of imports. To sum up on the main food safety risks, we have to focus on maximum residual levels of pesticides and hygiene of products. We know from our work that leading Serbian exporters already work very closely with farmers to provide them with advice and assistance in form of mini global gap standards in order to reduce risks of products in compliance and contamination. And again, once again, please consider possible reputational risks for exporters as Serbian exporters consider their export development plans and take regulations seriously. With that, I would like to thank you for attention, and I'll be happy to answer questions later on.
Thank you very much, Dmitry, for your presentation and these precise and concrete cases and information regarding food safety. And now we continue with another speaker.
Now you will hear from the author of this publication, Mr. Zlatko Jovanovic, who gained experience in the public sector, in the Ministry of Agriculture and many other organizations and projects. He was a part of the technical support program of the EU. Zlatko, please take the floor. Good day, everybody. I hope you can hear me. First of all, I would like to thank the Development Agency of Serbia for hosting this great event. And I hope it will be very useful for our exporters aiming for the US market. And I would like to thank the sponsors from EBRD and FAO on this very good program. Let us start. You have before you a presentation that will provide as much information as possible about this guide that you can download free of charge from the RAS website. This is the link, you can see it. And you can see there that in addition to the guide, there is a series of other documents that would additionally assist you about individual aspects and issues of exports. Who is this guide for? It is intended for companies from Western Balkans with export capacities who wish to export to the US. It also shows the potential of the US market for fruit and vegetables. And our colleague just now discussed raspberries, but there is a whole lot of other produce that can be of interest for this market. The essence of the guide is to give to provide requirements, to discuss requirements and rules. There are administrative, sanitary, phytosanitary, and market requirements, and I will try to address all these issues. Now, this is an electronic document. You can print it, of course, but it's much better for you to use it electronically because you can click. It has a lot of links you can click on, so you can visit the website of EBRD and FAO and other relevant information. There are several parts to this guide or handbook. So potentials and descriptions of the market, then one part about finding information of importance for the US and in the US legislation related to importing food, fruit and vegetables. Then one big part is dedicated to the largest FDA, largest agency for relevant agency for export, then also customs, of course, and the USDA is also important. We also provided some practice examples. And we would like to thank Ciro Gojno and MP from Serbia. They selflessly shared their experiences that were very useful for us in formulating this guide. We also provided a lot of useful contacts, companies and persons who could be of use to you. Then also a list of fairs for various fruits and vegetables. And at the beginning, when we started, we did a very good desk research, contacting a large number of people abroad. And I must say this is a highly comprehensive guide that is not present in many countries of the world. Perhaps some of the exporters in northern Italy, but this is really a unique document, and please make use of it. As for the potential of the market, You have already heard that this is a huge market indeed. In our guide, we of course provided more details, and we provided descriptions of their retail market, and we also discussed different states because there are different players in different states. And then, especially after COVID pandemics started, online trade has grown significantly. Amazon is in the lead by all means, but also mainstream retail supply chains are joining. They have a very developed trade options themselves. As for catering and eating out, this system is very developed, and they also have a highly developed system of home deliveries of food. This is perhaps not something that is very interesting for you, but can be a challenge for exporters to join this type of delivery of food. What we already also mentioned is that the US is a large B2B market for frozen fruit and vegetables, especially berries. And also there is great demand for frozen organic fruit. They also are a market for chilled fresh fruit. You should look into that. We provided analysis of exports of Western Balkan countries as well, so you could have an idea about what is exported. FDA is the most important agency, Food and Drugs Administration, and also important is, of course, USDA. They have a part of the competencies and powers here after the 9/11 events. The US drastically changed their security system, and also they paid more attention to food safety. So they adopted the law on bioterrorism prevention in 2002, and that is when they introduced a mandatory registration of companies with the FDA, which has to be renewed. This is not a complicated procedure. It is free, and most of you can do it yourself or through a specialized agency. Each consignment, food consignment, even private, let alone commercial, you have to have a prior notice for that to the FDA. It has to be done. And what is important is that American companies have to have a register of suppliers. But if you are a US supplier, you are subject to this law. So the system of food safety was improved in 2011. This is the Food Safety Modernization Act, called FISMA for short. They provide a number of rule books and handbooks assisting producers to adjust their standards and processes. This sounds like a lot, but when you we actually already are mostly in line with all those standards through ISO standards and others, what we just need to adapt further a little. So we need to have preventive control in line with the food safety plan. It is just HACCP only upgraded. And if you are a supplier for B2B segment, then you will be a program of verification of suppliers called FSVP. What you need to have preventive controls, and you need to have qualified personnel for that. And you can find in our guide who can be that person, or perhaps you can hire a third party to do that. As for the labeling of food under FDA requirements, this is more complex, but we described everything, even how to label containers for bulk produce. For a retail packaging, it is the most important thing is this nutritional table, that kind of label, and you see that some changes were introduced. On the left, you have the old table, on the right, the new table. And there is a link that you can click on and see the entire rulebook on nutritional tables. As also you need to pay attention to this. We are more liberal about claims in the Balkans, but you see what you see on the shelves, you can cure this, you can cure that. This is strictly regulated in America, so I'm asking you to pay attention to this, because you may encounter problems when declaring your goods and entering the market. As for those companies who produce preserved or pickled fruit and vegetables, they are subject to registering food canning establishments regulations, and then you will get your own number, and each technologic procedure must be elaborated, described, and reported to the FDA for every product separately. For instance, apricot jam and plum jam, they may be completely the same, but they need to be in line with the FDA regulations, and they need to be described separately. And there is one contact person registered with the FDA and responsible for these processes. When it comes to juices, there is a HACCP for juices, so-called. There is a link. This is not a problem. So you just go and check. What is different from what we already apply in our juice factories? I believe the processes are equivalent. What is also important is additives and colors. You need to, well, in Europe we use E numbers. The Americans have their own names, and not all additives and colors are allowed in the US that are allowed in the EU. It's different. So we need to consult before starting procedure. We need to consult their legislation. Pesticides are strictly controlled. You already heard about incidents. They check quantitative and qualitative presence of pesticides. So they also control for prohibited pesticides, but also for allowed pesticides, they check maximum residue levels. For MRLs, it's good to register to the global MRL base. You can, it's free of charge for some basic functions and for 3 markets, and then you can upgrade, of course, and pay. If still there is an incident, they find something in the consignment, FDA inspection will put the company on the import alert list, which brings inconveniences because every consignment in the future will be mandatorily inspected. What is good is if you do not repeat your mistakes, you can then apply and ask to be deleted from this list. The procedure is also in the guide described. As for the customs of the US, there are general procedures fully described in the handbook, but what I want you to pay attention to is that most Western Balkan countries in the GSP system, you need to obtain Form A with the Chamber of Commerce, and then you will be subject to this trade agreement. The exporters are already familiar with this preferential system and useful more.
Ministarstvo poljoprivrede je nadležno za 3 stvari, to su
USDA is responsible for several things, such as the control and eradication of quarantine and economically harmful pests into the United States, as well as classification of vegetables and fruits. The guidebook also provides phytosanitary certificate information, and moreover, the American importer has to fill out PPQ 587 form, and together with your importer, you have to look through the database which is available on the APHIS website, and to see whether your product might be prone to certain special measures in terms of quarantine diseases and pests. We, for Serbian market and for the Macedonian market, we've noticed there are certain important obstacles. We haven't noticed that there are certain additional declarations that are needed, but it's always good to check beforehand. Also, there is rulebook on labeling of country of origin labeling. Today, we're not a large countries that export fruits and vegetables, but since we are importing a lot of fruit, such as raspberries, blueberries, etc., maybe this will be of importance. USDA has market standards that are harmonized with UNECE standards, and here you have links for fruit and vegetables as well. In terms of organic production, the rule book describes organic production and how to obtain an organic certificate in the US, how to mark the food, whether it's food organic or made with organic ingredients, because there is a difference, and when we can place these labels on our packaging. In the guidebook, you also have examples from practice. We have information about procedures, about partners they use when cooperating with FDA, and this is very useful for you to read. Also, the examples of importer and distributor to the United States is provided.
zovemo, a dali smo i specijalizovane
And we
kompanije.
also provided case studies of specialized companies that actually help
preuzimajući ulogu agenta, na primjer, za vas.
By undertaking the role of agent and communicate with the FDA and the customs. Also, fairs or important events have been enumerated for all types of fruits and vegetables, as well as other food, and about magazines, journals, and news bulletins where you can subscribe even for free to gain as much relevant information before you decide to place your goods on this particular market, to see what your chances are, etc. To sum up, you need a current up-to-date FDA registration. You have an agent who communicates with the FDA in the United States. Your product needs to be correctly declared and labeled. You have to have a product produced with ingredients approved by FDA and does not agree any pesticides above the maximum amount.
I da vam je objekat za konzervisanje hrane registrovan.
Your premises for food production needs to be registered. For each shipment to the United States, you need to announce the shipment and notify the FDA, of course, or your products and premises need to be harmonized with the FISMA law. That will be it in brief. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer these questions for you. Thank you, Zlatko, for your presentation. We'll hear from Dr. Mile, who is the chief technologist when it comes to the production of products. Mile, you may take the floor. So, Dr. Mile Veljevic, good day, everyone. I wish to thank the organizer for inviting me to participate in such a webinar with a very interesting and up-to-date topic. I would also like to thank all the participants. Since we are kind of running late, I will try to be as concise as possible, especially when it comes to the technology of production and food and product safety. We'll try to continue on the tangent of my previous colleagues and speakers. First and foremost, Zlatko mentioned several times, what's important is that the product needs to be harmonized with the legislation of the market. In this case, the market of the US of A. Maybe we already have an existing product, or we want to develop a new product and then place it in the market. This guide will be a useful tool for you because you'll learn everything you need to know in order to approach FDA with your initial idea and initial intention to export goods to the USA. If we're talking about clean label products, then it will be much easier. Clean label products are products that have clean ingredients, there are no additives, or we have additives that are well known and widely used. However, if we have complex products with different additives, especially preservatives and colorings, food colorings, etc., then we really have to study the legislation in order not to end up in a problem. All these links enumerated here you will find in the guide what we need to pay attention to. One thing is safety, of course. Quality is the second thing, and third are the technical preconditions such as declarations and labeling. In terms of the packaging,
Sa druge strane,
you will find everything that is needed on these links. The ingredients and packaging are more or less similar, like in Europe. Labeling is what is different.
Izuzetno bitna stvar
Third very important thing are contaminants. From the case study, we saw that these are pesticide remnants. Why does this happen? It happens because we have a large number of farms that do not have the plant protection diary and fail to consult plant protection experts. Plant protection materials and chemicals quickly change, and new are introduced, old ones are removed from the list of allowed chemicals based on scientific findings on their impact. Zlatko mentioned also health declarations. Nutrition and health declarations exist. The rule book on those exists in Serbia as well as in the EU. It's harmonized with the EU, but the problem is control. If you look around in the supermarket, you'll see a number of products in Serbia whose labels have not been harmonized with the rule book. We don't have enough inspectors and we don't have enough market surveillance actors to be able to check this. However, in the United States, it's different. In the EU, it's also different. So we need to pay attention and respect the rules prescribed regarding labeling.
Imamo kvalitet u užem smislu i kvalitet u širem smislu. Ako gledamo široko,
Speaking of quality,
samog proizvoda. Sam proizvod može biti i
the product itself can be tasty, tasteless, but that's not something that we need to pay attention to. Our primary concern should be the safety of the product. What does the American market require? They require the same as the Serbian market and the EU market. The HACCP is the minimum requirement that needs to be met. A lot of companies have HACCP systems only on paper, but they do not respect the principles and provisions thereof in practice. We have to invest a lot of effort into improving this. America is a very demanding market, and we cannot do anything just for show. We have to actually implement everything that we say that we do. In terms of implementing standards that are important for quality control, these standards cost. Each introduction of a standard bears a cost, and that's not it. Standards are how you have to maintain, you have to update annually, you have to actually invest to ensure that those standards are being met. So, if we're planning exports, the budget for standardization has to be set aside. What is also important is, generally speaking, we need to ensure that we have products of a standard quality. A lot of companies have an issue with this. In many respects, the product quality is different from segment to segment. We have to have trained personnel who will take care of production. Why is a good technologist an important person to have on board? The most important thing is to develop the product and implement the production, as well as control the quality to ensure that everything is happening as it should be happening. Again, I mentioned two important cases. We have a product. Secondly, we are developing a new product. If we're developing a new product, what is important? Important is to follow the trends. If we're using old recipes, something that is well known, we will not be able to position ourselves well on the market. It will all depend on marketing, on advertising,
proizvodnje. To uglavnom nije slučaj da
This is
od
not the case.
novac u tom
We don't have a lot of money immediately, so we're not a big company. So we have to investigate the market properly in order to be able to place things on the market.
Jeste da se rade novi inovativni proizvodi.
New innovative products should be in the focus of producers.
Može se primetiti da se jako puno oslanjamo na tradiciju, pa vidite
we are focusing on tradition a lot. It says like, oh, made like our grandmas used to make it, traditional taste, etc. I think it's time to move away from this. I think we should rebrand ourselves as a country of innovation, as a country of advancement, as a country of science, as a country of that uses new technologies. They're not interested in this pepper spread that we have here called Ivar that was made 50 years ago. They would like a good quality product, that adds value, that satisfies one's senses, and also satisfies certain other criteria, has an effect on one's beauty, has CSR impact, or has a health impact. Several times we mentioned health safety. American market is very characteristic in terms of its requirements. Why do we need a good technologist? I will give you a few examples here from practice that actually have happen. On one side, you can see marmalade that's gone wrong. Why does this happen? Because the process of preserving the food is wrong. Something went wrong in this process.
Najzahtevnijih aktivnosti i tu zaista ne smemo da dovodimo sebe u bilo kakve kompromise. Možete da
we
vidite
really cannot compromise here. You can see this product as once you're on the list, on the negative list of the US, it's very difficult for you to get off that list. Why does this happen? It happens because of the lack of information on the proper way of conserving products and lack of procedure. On the other hand, you have sweet preserve from the UAE. You can see there is mold on top.
Da se vratim na neko iskustvo sa proizvođačima, veoma često se koriste procedure koje su nasleđene i pritom su nasleđene ili
very often the procedures that are used are from tradition or from other periods. Not all procedures are good. We have to consult, and if we're not sure, we have to consult someone who does this.
You can see this is this year's example. These are gherkins, and you can see that was the issue of inadequate pasteurization and formulation of the brine. You can see you can see that everything has gone wrong here. And we mentioned labeling also. You can see this is 100% juice of strawberry, and the composition is apple. You can see it as a, a clerical error, perhaps, but this is a huge mistake, actually. And if we have this mistake, is a problem, but even more of a problem if this goes to the market. You can see the gem where water. You can see water in the gem jar. This can't be, shouldn't happen. This is cabbages intended for Germany. You can see this was the fermentation gone wrong, and the storing conditions were wrong as well. That is why you need a good technologist. The labor market is as it is. But what we need to pay attention to is permanent education and training of all staff. We need to monitor all the newest scientific research. We need to be open for everything. And currently, in the country, conservative opinions are dominant, and the technologists are usually very conservative. This is not a good thing for company development. And finally, after production, you need to do quality control. According to the current legislation, each batch should be controlled. This costs a lot of money in practice. What is being tested? Physical and chemical testing, microbiological testing, sensory analysis, pesticide residues, and some metals as well, whether they are present. The testing is done in accredited laboratories. There are a number of them in Serbia. You will opt for the one that gives you a best offer, of course, but what is important to say is that you need to have a list of reliable suppliers. You can do everything right, but if you take raw materials from the wrong supplier, you can have problem with the pesticides and the heavy metals and so on. You need to be very careful about your suppliers. What are the chances of this region, the opportunities? Raw materials, primarily, we cannot compete with some things where other people are better and superior, perhaps. But raspberries, sour cherries, but also different forest fruit like rose hips, also some other fruit and vegetables, and the mushrooms also, they are an important potential. And then we need to be innovative. You need to offer something new to the world, because if you compete, you need to be strong in implementing your projects. There are different potentials when it comes to cooperation between businesses and scientific world. So I believe the science institutions are their door is open. This is what is important for technology and product development. And of course, I will be glad to answer any questions you might have. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for this information, Mile. I'm sure they will be very much of use. Once again, I would like to remind you that you can ask any of our presenters. You can ask in the chat. Finally, a current topic for FDA regulations and exports to the US. And once again, we are asking you to visit our website, the website of the Development Agency of Serbia, where you can download the various documents free of charge. We have different topics covered that are related to exports. Perhaps we can have a look at the video now.
Sve kompanije koje žele da izvoze prehrambene proizvode na teritoriju Sjedinjenih Američkih Država, neophodno je da prvenstveno izvrše registraciju kod FDA.
All the companies wishing to export to the US need to register with the FDA. before they do anything, they need to register and then start exporting. FDA is a Food and Drug Administration, the government agency with the Department of Health of the US, and they need to ensure that the food is fit for human consumption and compliant. So this refers to all foods imported in the US. All producers and exporters are responsible for safety, hygiene, and labeling requirements.
Sve kompanije koje su izvršile registraciju
all the companies who registered with the FDA need to renew their registration every 2 years, and they can do that every even year in the period from 1st of October until the end of the year. There is no fee for registration, and if you need assistance, you can contact the help desk in English. This is a complex procedure and documents. It's a good idea to contact agents in your country who can help you with that, with registration. After you register successfully, you get your FDA number. In the US, there is special legislation about preserved and canned food. Then companies producing canned food, in addition to FDA registration, they need to register their facility as well. And after that, they will get a specific number for food canning and food canning facility. And they also need to register production process for each individual product. And on that occasion, you get a special number for each product. It is a very it is called SID number. You need to mention clearly the numbers you were assigned on your products. When you register the products, it is also, all these registrations are free of charge. That is also important to say. The tests to be done by accredited laboratories are sufficient for exports to the US. You need to have HACCP implemented, and every foodstuff that is to be placed on the market is subject to risk analysis and preventive control, prevention control, which need to be part of the food safety plan, which must be submitted to the FDA. And all the information from this plan and all the other documents need to be correct and true, because they can send inspection to the facilities. The advice is to prepare this food safety plan based on the HACCP plan. And the document may be prepared in the local language, but the advice is also to be prepared, for you to prepare it in English as well. The advice is also to contact your Chamber of Commerce in order to see about reducing customs duties when exporting to the US. In a registration process, you need to name your agent in the US. It has to be a resident in the US and agreed. And of course, such a person, such an agent needs to agree to be your agents. They are a link, a liaison between the producer and the FDA. And if the FDA cannot contact you directly, they can contact the agent and provide such agent with information and documents. And this is the same as if they contacted you as a producer. It is important to say that the US agent is not the important or sales agents, this FDA agent. It's a different thing. There are internal websites offering services of locating the agent. It would be a good thing for you to talk to your client in America, because it can be an employee of your customer in the US. In order for the foodstuffs to be exported and placed on the US market, it is very important for it to be in line with all the requirements and compliant with the legislation. As for the packaging, they need to be labeled and provide specific information in English, such as the name of the product, address, telephone number, and name of the responsible company. In this case, it can be a producer, distributor, or both. A list of contents, a list of ingredients, and they need to be in both imperial and metric units. And they need to be present in a clearly identified format. This is different from your local tables and labels and requirements. The main difference is that allergens must be highlighted on the label in case there are allergens. The American legislation requires country of origin clearly indicated, and there is a minimum size of letters. And the FDA, on the FDA website, you can see a rule book with clearly defined clearly defined design of these labels. It is very important to have correct labeling. If you are to export to the US for the first time, then it's a good idea to check for your labels in order for you to be sure that the labels are in line with the American legislation. I hope that this was an interesting video for you. And now we are going to do Q&A, the last part of our webinar today. Currently, we have one question in the chat. I'm going to read it, and perhaps somebody will be able to answer. The general level of allowed pesticide residue in the EU for substances where MRL is not defined is 0.01 milligrams per kilogram. What about the US? Zlatko, Mile, who can answer this question?
Iskreno, ja nisam siguran koji je dozvoljeni nivo.
Honestly, I'm not sure about the allowed levels, but in my presentation, there is a link for the allowed pesticide levels and for all the defined pesticide. And when you click on that link, you will get a list with allowed quantities.
malo bi bilo neuputno.
We should not try to answer this question from the top of our heads. We provided quite a good amount of information, so we would kindly ask you to check other resources and links we provided in terms of pesticide residue. You'll find all the information there. And the guide, audit.ras.gov.rs, you can find all the important information, including these residue information.
Can elaborate more about the need and the need to diversify the exports for Serbia and the potentials of agri-food sector. What is the best course of action to take, Dmitry? What do you suggest?
Thank you for this question. I tried to actually look for the information on Definisan in SGS DG Comply, but it would take a little bit longer. That tool from the private sector from SGS that I mentioned allows comparing maximum residue levels between different markets for specific products or substances. So I hope the answer to it is not that far, but to answer the question about diversification, I think Emmanuel covered it well in the beginning by mentioning some specific cases. Maybe I can just reflect on some of these. With 50% of Serbian agricultural exports going to the European and 30% or even more maybe going to CEFTA member countries, Serbia relies heavily on these two markets with which it has free trade agreements. The market is not standing still, it is evolving. The European Union may sign other free trade agreements with other countries. On one of my slides, for instance, for raspberries, I've shown how much Ukraine has increased exports of raspberries to the European Union. So the competition in this protected EU market may increase. So I think the need to diversify is there. When it comes to apple, I think the concentration of trade is for Serbia is even worse. It's, if I'm not mistaken, it's about 90% of apples go to the Russian market. So exporters really need to consider various risks. It may be, you know, phytosanitary issues that may occur one day, of course, God save, but what if Russia normalizes its trade relations with Western countries that had historically supplied apples to the Russian Federation? What would happen to Serbian apple exports then? So I think this clearly justifies the case to need, you know, and the need to diversify. As for the new markets, it is very natural that Serbia needs to grow into the markets that are growing and where food consumption is growing. So it is definitely Sub-Saharan Africa, it is definitely Southeast Asia, it is definitely North America. So I hope I answered that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dmitry. Zlatko, nastavit ću na srpskom. Imali smo nedavno pitanje na društvenim mrežama koje se odnosilo na free trade agreement.
We had a question on the market related to the free trade agreement with the US. At that time, it was stated that this agreement stopped functioning at the end of December 2020. There is a system of preferences, but has anything changed in the past year in terms of agreements of this kind, as well as agreements with the US?
Hvala na pitanju. Ja bih ovo pitanje proširio malo.
Thank you for the question. I would extend this question because not only Serbia is in charge of GSP. We have North Macedonia, Bosnia-Herzegovina. This was also mentioned during my presentation, and also in the guide, you have links that take you to certain databases where for each individual country, you can see what the status of the global preference system status is. I noticed that among us in the audience is my former colleague, Tatjana Boric-Maslach, with whom I consulted regarding this question in order to provide the answer. I would kindly ask Tanya to say a few words, if possible, to see what the Congress and USDR are doing in terms of this. Today, my name is Tatjana Maslach. I am the representative of the USDA at the US Embassy in Belgrade. Zlatko and I worked together while he was leading the technical assistance projects. There's no free trade agreement between Serbia and the US, unfortunately. Serbia had numerous times tried to address the government of the US to negotiate a free trade agreement, but Serbia is too small of a country and they do not have enough employees to work on a free trade agreement with Serbia. General system of preferences, or this is something different. It's a decision of Congress that does not only include Serbia and Balkan countries, it includes over 100 developing countries, and which allows these developing countries to import products in the United States. There's a list for each country, a list of products. There's about 5,000 products on this list of Serbia, and the majority of agricultural and food products are on this list. Unfortunately, this decision is adopted on a 2 to 3 year period. It is adopted by Congress, and the decision that was adopted in 2017 actually expired on the 31st of December 2020. And until then, companies who are exporting fruits and vegetables to the US have contacted me to see when this agreement will actually be coming to force again. We've sent USDR question. USDR contacted Congress to see when this could happen. This is in the package of other rule books, and they cannot give us any information or deadline. Previously, we waited for a year and a half to get a new decision. But what's important for Serbian exporters is to keep all the documents because
znači carine Amerike naplatiti retroaktivno. Prošli put sve firme
can be charged retroactively.
Tako će biti, tako ne možemo jednostavno da upozorimo sve izvoznike.
Importers in the US to keep complete documentation from the BCP, from the customs, and that they will be able to get the money back. I hope that by the end of the year we'll have a positive response from Congress. Our former deputy ambassador, Gabriel Escobar, left to a high position in the US. He's the Deputy State Secretary for Europe, which includes the Balkans and the Kosovo issue, and he is acquainted with this. He has good contacts in Congress, and he will be able to help us because everything is being held up there. The bigger the country, the bigger the bureaucracy, so we're just waiting. That's it in brief. Thank you, Tatjana, for this answer. We had a similar question.
To mislim da je bilo 2017, negde na 3 godine oni potpisuju.
Originally it was 2017, and then this decision was expired, and they again adopt this decision. They revise the list of products every couple of years. That's why they do. Thank you again. Now I would like to ask another question to Mile. If Mile could answer, since this is a very troublesome market, I mean, a very demanding market for which we really need to prepare ourselves. What would your advice be, in brief, for our people here? What would be the advice for small and medium-sized enterprises, how to know when their product is ready to go onto the market?
Thank
you for the question. First thing that our business people need to do is to evaluate their capacities. Export to the United States requires a lot of money. You have to be capable to produce a lot and also transport it to the US. Of course, the more goods you transport, the lower the costs of transportation are. Of course, you need to ensure that you meet all the requirements in terms of food safety and quality of your product. Once you analyze all this quite well, once you clean up your own yard, then you are ready to export. And again, another very important thing is pay attention to your clients. Take care of your clients. Your clients need to also be happy and satisfied, because food processing and food industry is very specific, because mistakes that happen can be mistakes that are made on purpose. Some mistakes in production can also be made on purpose. So,
hvala mnogo na odgovoru. Ovim i završavamo.
Thank you for the answer. This will be the end of the webinar. I would like to thank the organizers and all the speakers, the participants of this webinar today, for the time and the presentations, and of course all of you who have taken part and who have listened in. I hope you received great information and advice related to export to the American market. Also, you can access our guidebook for free, bodich.ris.gov.rs. You can get all this information that you received here in a different shape and form. Thank you so much, and until we meet again, until another guidebook, another rulebook, another instruction, I wish you a great day.